as the world stops using coal, or indeed as we put the brakes on our coal exports for climate action, there are a bunch of workers who currently work in that industry who are going to need other jobs to go to.
What we found through our investigation is systematic discrimination by Amazon against its employees, particularly individuals who were pregnant or who had disabilities.
PBS is the one place where we can get honest, in-depth, incredibly well-researched films about where we've been as a country.
We're worried about the NLRA being stripped away. We're worried about labor law being destroyed. And if we don't understand our history, the only reason those laws exist is because workers took militant action. There were general strikes, national strikes. Labor unrest led to creating that labor law in the first place.
I had 5 big apple boxes of fruit dumped in the lower back of my back.
So let me see. So you were away last week, traveling Japan, I think, right?
That's right. I feel like getting out of town Thanksgiving week's a good time to leave the country. And if you file free, you get 2 days for free on the employer. And then if you file 3 days of vacation, you can get a 9-day stretch. So that's kind of how I economize my PTO.
You have given this a lot of thought. I'm impressed. So very, very good. Good to have you back. But of course, now this week, Harold is off. Now, Harold, we have to tell folks, we are recording this late on Thursday. We rescheduled from our normal time. And Harold was going to join us. He's on the West Coast, so it'll be like 7 o'clock his time. But he is helping his brother-in-law celebrate his birthday. And apparently, his brother-in-law is winning at the blackjack table, and Harold does not have the heart to drag him away. So I feel like that's fair.
Harold's partying and gambling.
Well, I was trying to put it. All right, I guess we should get to the show. What do you think? All right, folks. Chris Garlock here. Welcome to another edition of the Labor Radio Podcast Weekly.
I'm Patrick Dixon, bringing you the best the best labor stories from across the Labor Radio Podcast Network.
See, this is what happens when you take a week off.
I wasn't that sharp before.
All right, we have got another powerful lineup this week, and here's what's coming up.
From Solidarity Breakfast in Australia, activists gather in Newcastle for Rising Tide, a mass people's blockade aimed at shutting down the world's largest coal port. Then, on the Power at Work blogcast, a deep look at the legal and organising battles against Amazon, featuring New Jersey Attorney General Matthew Platkin and Teamsters leader Randy Corgan.
Then, On Writing explores threats to public broadcasting. Tales from the Reuther Library features the CWA's Sara Nelson on why labor history matters. And On the Line introduces the Apple Box Bells, the Union Women of BC's fruit packing industry. Can't wait to hear that one. Let's get to it, shall we?
Why not?
All right, first up, Solidarity Breakfast from the 3CR folks down in Australia. Thousands descended on Newcastle for Rising Tide, a massive climate and labor justice action aimed at stopping coal shipments by blockading the port itself. Zane from Green Left calls in from the camp on the eve of the blockade.
You're listening to a 3CR podcast created in the studios of independent community radio station 3CR in Melbourne, Australia.
Good morning, everybody. This is Annie, and we've got Zane, who's up at the Rising Tide event that's going on at the moment. Tell us all about what's going on, Zane.
So I'm up in sunny Mullabimba, Newcastle, at the People's Blockade of the world's largest coal port. This has not happened every year since 2005, but there's been at least a dozen of them since then. and this is set to be the largest one yet. There was about 7,000 people here last year. It's looking like numbers are going to eclipse that this year. So there's a big tent city, there's large marquees and meeting places. There's lots of little tents set up where people are camping, and we're going to be using people power to blockade what is the world's largest coal exporting port, and about 80 to 85% of what gets exported out of the port of Newcastle is thermal coal for power stations. There's a complex discussion to be had about coking coal that's used in steel production, but the bulk of what's going out of here is power stations, and that's the low-hanging fruit that we need to get rid of and replace with renewables. So it's a plum target, it's a choke point, and it's eminently possible to shut it down with lots of people, and that's what we're doing.
Can you tell us a bit more about the demands that Rising Tide's making?
Yeah, sure. So Rising Tide has three demands. Number one, immediately cancel all new fossil fuel projects. I think that's pretty incontrovertible. And we've got a lot of coal seam gas activists here. There's group up in the Northern Territory who've been fighting coal seam gas in the Beetaloo Basin. There's people who've been involved in the Save the Burrup campaign. There's people from the campaign to stop coal seam gas mining in the Pilliga. So I'll try and find something less windy. This is a blockade of a coal port, but it's also a sort of a lightning rod and a focal point for activists from across the land who are opposing fossil fuel projects. And it's kind of welcoming for all of those who, it's one struggle and one fight.
And that's
the second demand is to tax fossil fuel export profits at 78% to fund community and industrial transition and pay for climate loss and damage. Norway taxes their oil exports at 78%, and they've got a $2 trillion sovereign wealth fund to show for it, and they can fund all sorts of decent services and, a solid welfare state in Norway. We could have something like that here in Australia, but typically, because our governments are captured by multinational fossil fuel and mining interests, the resources stolen off Aboriginal land are practically given away for free, and there's very little to show for it. And that's a big issue here because as the world stops using coal, or indeed as we put the brakes on our coal exports for climate action, there are a bunch of workers who currently work in that industry who are going to need other jobs to go to. And so the key part of that demand is to free up the cash to be able to invest in alternative job creation in the region so that those workers aren't put in a position where they're needing to choose between staying in the coal job or becoming unemployed. And there is high unemployment in the region and certainly in the Upper Hunter. So it's a very live and serious issue. And then the final demand, end all coal exports from Newcastle by 2030. That's frankly pretty ambitious. I don't know if we're quite going to get that one across the line, but the Rising Tide have been doing this blockade since 2020, and spokespeople for the coal industry, including, unfortunately, some in the union movement, have said, you can't just shut coal exports overnight. Well, by the time we get to 2030, Rising Tide will have been doing these protests for a quarter of a century.
Exactly.
So I don't think you can call a quarter of a century overnight.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you.
Hey, this is Carmen Rodriguez from El Desvío. At LACLA, we are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network, with more than 200 labor radio shows and podcasts from across the country and around the world. The Labor Radio Podcast Network, where working people speak. Find us at laborradionetwork.org.
Next, we move to the Power at Work blogcast, where host Seth Harris digs into the escalating fight over Amazon's treatment of workers New Jersey Attorney General Matthew Platkin has filed 2 major lawsuits accusing Amazon of violating worker protection laws. And Teamsters leader Randy Corgan, who hosts the Teamsters View podcast, also a member of the network, connects those legal challenges to ongoing organizing.
It's all connected, Patrick. It's all connected.
It's logistics.
Hello, powerful people, and welcome back to Power at Work. I'm Seth Harris from the Burns Center for Social Change. Welcome to this Power at Work blogcast in which we will discuss the ongoing fight for Amazon's employees that's raging in the courts and in the workplace. In this episode, we'll discuss 2 lawsuits brought by New Jersey's Attorney General Matthew Platkin that allege Amazon has broken the laws protecting its workers. We're privileged to speak with Attorney General Platkin today. And we'll speak with the man who's leading the International Brotherhood of Teamsters Amazon division about his union's efforts to organize Amazon delivery drivers and others. Perhaps most important, we'll discuss the intersection of New Jersey's lawsuits against Amazon. So, General Platkin, I want to start by helping our audience to understand the 2 lawsuits that you filed. And let's start with the lawsuit that you filed, I think it was in October, alleging discrimination by Amazon against pregnant workers and against workers with disabilities, which violates New Jersey's laws. Let me just note that you're not the only one suing Amazon on this basis. There was an alleged class action or a proposed class action lawsuit against Amazon, also on the basis of disability discrimination. And that lawsuit, that complaint, alleges that Amazon intimidated workers out of filing disability accommodation requests, put workers with disabilities on unpaid leave when they made accommodations requests, and then it threatened to fire workers with disabilities when they took too much time off. A little catch-22. They made them take time off, and then they threatened to fire them when they did take time off.
This is a really significant complaint. Amazon is obviously a major employer across the country, but a particularly major employer in New Jersey, 50,000 employees across nearly 5 dozen facilities. And what we found through our investigation is systematic discrimination by Amazon against its employees, particularly individuals who were pregnant or who had disabilities. And both of those are protected under our state's law against discrimination, which is the oldest and strongest state civil rights statute in the country. And so under that statute, it's very clear an employer has to provide accommodations unless it causes an undue hardship on them. And so you think about someone who's pregnant working in a warehouse, they could give them something simple as bathroom breaks, water breaks, reduced weight restrictions or workloads. And Amazon, as you noted, said basically did everything but that. So they placed people on unpaid, as we allege in our complaint, on unpaid leave when they sought a request. They terminated them. They punished them. They retaliated against them for even making an accommodation request. They gave them unreasonable accommodations when they did do it. They held them to performance metrics that were just not tenable, and they effectively drove them out of the warehouse. And they did this in a systematic fashion across thousands and thousands of complaints that we reviewed.
So, Randy, have the discrimination issues that General Platkin was just telling us about rising up from Amazon warehouse workers and drivers, are you hearing about these things in your organizing efforts? Are these issues that he just described part of those organizing efforts?
Absolutely. We're shocked by the fact that you see thousands of workers struggling with this subject or with these situations and circumstances, and then they're compelled to file those complaints. And then you see them on such a large scale happening all over the place. Clearly, it's wrong, but when you see it on this sort of scale, and you see it all over the country, as you pointed out a minute ago in your question, we're seeing it from California to New Jersey and everywhere in between. And we're seeing this massive employer that should be taking a position of when you're the wealthiest or one of the wealthiest, and you're at the forefront of public display. In other words, your brand is recognized on a very, very large scale. You have a responsibility. You have a responsibility to the constituents, you have a responsibility to the consumer, you have a responsibility to the community. And it's important for you as an employer to step up and actually try to prevent as much of this as possible. So yeah, our team is seeing this all over the place and on a scale that's never been seen before. It's incredible.
New Jersey's Attorney General Matthew Platkin, the Teamsters Amazon Division Leader Randy Corrigan, thank you so much for a fantastic conversation. We appreciate your passion and your action on these areas. Really important. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, this is Michaela from the UFCW 3000 podcast. I'm proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network with more than 200 labor radio shows and podcasts from across the country and around the world. The Labor Radio Podcast Network, where working people speak. Find us at laborradionetwork.org.
Our next stop is On Writing, where public television writers are sounding the alarm about ongoing threats to free speech and public media. Rupishi Shabbat, June Teal, Peter Miller, and Jill Koza-Turner break down why protecting public broadcasting matters for workers and for democracy.
You're listening to On Writing, a podcast from the Writers Guild of America East. I'm Rupeshi Bhatt. I'm a preschool TV writer and a member of the Guild's Animation Caucus. I'm joined by fellow public broadcast TV writers June Thiel, Peter Miller, and Jill Koza-Turner. Today, we'll discuss the current state of public broadcast following threats like the loss of federal funding. You'll hear from industry professionals on why it's so critical to fight back, to protect both public broadcasting specifically and free speech overarchingly. Hey June, hey Peter, hey Jill. For me, public media means programs that are research-backed, relevant to communities, and available for free. Jill, Peter, what is the value of public media to you both?
Well, writing for PBS, I've probably written more shows for PBS than any other broadcaster, and it really has been a training ground in how to create those engaging, age-appropriate stories that also weave in a very strong curriculum. They've always been so intentional about who they partner with for their kids' shows. They research episodes. They bring their scripts to actual children, so we get to see how children are reacting to them. And if I'm being super honest, because we always work with, I've been able to work with so many child development experts on these shows that it's really informed how I parent my own children. It's just given me so many tools personally behind the scenes. It makes a huge impact, like June was saying, behind the screen and on the screen.
Yeah. For me, I work in the history space, so most of the films I've worked on are about historical subjects. PBS is the one place where we can get honest, in-depth, incredibly well-researched films about where we've been as a country. And when we make history films for PBS, the level of detail, the level of research, the way we work with scholars, the way that our work is vetted and fact-checked, it is the most intensive of anything I've ever experienced. But beyond that, we get to tell stories that matter. And in a time now when we're going through so much complicated stuff, knowing our history is a way of knowing where we are now and how we got here, and provides tremendous amounts of insight into what we're about. And the way in which PBS has presented history is part of a national conversation that makes democracy possible. And I've just been so pleased to be able to share stories that matter with PBS audiences for free to every household in America.
Clearly, we are all proud of the programming that we've worked on, and it makes me very happy coming into the industry that Daniel Tiger with Jill was the first show that I got to write on. I love thinking about what you said, Jill, about it being a training ground. I want to hear more about the PBS programs that each of you have worked on. Maybe we can start with Daniel. Jill, would you be able to talk about the show and your experiences? Not biased, but
Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood is just a joy. And for those who aren't familiar, it is based on Mr. Rogers. It's a legacy project of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. It's created with the Fred Rogers Productions, who are wonderful partners in this. And really taking those lessons, those socio-emotional lessons, and bringing them into it to a new audience. We're just giving kids and their caregivers tools on how to manage their emotions. Fred Rogers said, when feelings are mentionable, they can be manageable. And so we're trying to label emotions as much as we possibly can and carry on that legacy of Fred.
Thank you so much. It was really insightful. So good to talk to you all.
This is Elise Bryant from the Labor Heritage Power Hour. We're proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network, with more than 200 labor radio shows and podcasts from across the country and around the world. The Labor Radio Podcast Network, where working people speak. Find us at laborradionetwork.org.
Now to Tales from the Reuther Library. In celebration of the library's 50th anniversary, AFA-CWA President Sara Nelson reflects on how flight attendants use labour and legislative history to fight and win better contracts today.
Hello, and welcome to another Tales from the Reuther Library from this 50-year-old Reuther Library building on the campus of Wayne State University in what I call home, Detroit, Michigan. I am Dan Galadner, your host, with the ever-radiant Troy Eller English. Hi, Troy.
Hi, Dan. How are you?
I could be better, but I'm not too bad. Thank you very much for asking. May 23rd, 2025 marked the 50th anniversary of the Walter P. Reuther Library Building's official open. So on the podcasts, we thought we would talk about it and talk to some of our donors about what the Reuther Library means to them and the importance of an archive for society, especially the stuff we have. We had a nice conversation with the president of the Association of Flight Attendants, CWA, Sara Nelson. Sara Nelson, thank you for being on Tales from the Reuther Library. I appreciate you being here today.
Thank you so much. This is very exciting, and happy birthday or anniversary to the Reuther Library.
Now, let's say you put your cell phone away. Let's say you don't have any meetings and you come into the Reuther Library. What would you love to sit down with and look at?
I would love to dig in more into the individual fights and years the flight attendants had those fights. Our first contract dealt with 4 main issues. We got a seniority list that was the basis of making sure that managers couldn't try to coerce flight attendants to trade sex for schedules. And it was the basis upon which we fought every other discriminatory battle going forward. We got double-digit pay increases. We got a cap on the amount of hours that the company could assign us to work. And we also got an 8-hour day. And that 8-hour day was the product of 80 years of the labor movement fighting for it before we got there. I would love to really dig into the other fights along the way so we could be clear about when we were achieving these things. Today, one of the things that the corporations have done through the Railway Labor Act is to slow down negotiations, coming around every 10 years, 5-year deals, then delaying negotiations where contracts are amendable, don't expire, so there's no strike deadline. We need to get back to the regular bargaining that we did initially to build up the career, and digging into those records at the Reuther Library to be able to put together a timeline of when we did those things and to show people we need to get back to regular bargaining. We need to have a handful of priorities. It's not going to be a Christmas tree every time we go to the bargaining table because we are handing the corporations the ability to delay negotiations. That is a project I would love to take on and get maybe a little help with.
Oh, absolutely. That's what we're here for. Always helping. That's what we think. But bigger danger happening now is ignoring and silencing of history. How dangerous is this?
Ignoring and silencing history is dangerous on so many levels. We're worried about the NLRA being stripped away, labor law being destroyed. If we don't understand our history, that actually the only reason that those laws exist is because workers took militant action. There were general strikes, there were national strikes. That labor unrest is what led to creating labor law in the first place. And if we don't understand that, we don't understand the struggles that other workers went through, then it feels like it's impossible to gain any ground. So you have to understand the history, not only of maybe where the failures were. Like, we should really look at the fact that labor failed when Ronald Reagan fired the air traffic controllers. That was our moment to stand with those air traffic controllers. I don't care if they endorsed Reagan or voted for him. That doesn't matter. Their fight was our fight. And so we have to understand where we made the missteps that undermined labor's power. But we also have to understand fundamentally how labor's power, when exercised, actually gave us the big gains that we count on today in society.
Well, thanks for spending the time with us. I do appreciate this. You spent the time with the Walter P. Reuther Library on our podcast talking about history and the importance of history. I thank you.
Tales from the Reuther Library is a production of the Walter P. Reuther Library and Archives of Labor and Urban Affairs at Wayne State University, coming to you from the heart of the Cultural Center of Detroit, Michigan. The producers are Dan Galadner and Troy Eller English. The music was composed by Bart Bilmer. And this podcast could not be done without the support of the entire Reuther Library staff. For more information, please visit our website at www.reuther.wayne.edu. Thanks for listening. Say goodbye, Dan.
Goodbye, Dan.
Hi, this is Michael Funky from the Radical Songbook on PirateButteRadio.com. I'm proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network with over 200 radio shows and podcasts across the country and around the world. Tune in, laborradionetwork.org. Power to the workers and their union.
And finally, on the line, stories of BC workers, SBC as in British Columbia, introduces the Apple Box Bells, the women who powered British Columbia's fruit packing industry for decades. Alma Folds and Lydia Bastian share stories of demanding work, union fights, and fierce solidarity. Plus, a musical tribute from Tiller's Folly.
We have some good music on that show. There's 2 songs on that show. They're pretty good.
They always do. I have to say, and this is wearing my Labor History Today hat, it is one of my favorite shows.
Me too.
Welcome to another edition of On the Line, the podcast that shines a light on the rich labor heritage of British Columbia. I'm your host, Rod Mickleborough. Today, we journey to the interior of the province to bring you the story of the women who worked in the fruit packing plants of BC's Okanagan Valley, from the 1920s right through to the 1970s. A lot of different fruit was picked and packed in the Okanagan, but these hard-working women were universally known as the Apple Box Bells. In this podcast, we once again draw on interviews by Sarah Diamond. We'll hear from Lydia Bastian. Lydia left Saskatchewan for the Okanagan with her husband and sister in 1937. It was the Depression, and jobs were scarce. But she was finally hired at a packing house in Oliver in 1939. She recalled the hard times and the realities of toiling in a non-union workplace.
And we just had to, in order to eat. There was a little rent to pay. We just had to work. And when I finally got on there at the packing house, well, then I put in 35 seasons. But I did work 10 and 12 hours a day. And I worked Sundays every time I was told to come. 2 girls were told to come on Sunday. Well, we were all told to come on Sunday. The 2 Russian girls didn't show up Sunday. Come Monday morning, they were working right by me, so I know all about it. The boss come up and fired them. This was before the union was in. He said, you were told to be at work, everybody. On Sunday, you didn't come yesterday, so we don't need you today.
It was tough, no matter how skilled the women. Long hours, constant pressure to keep up the pace, and usually a chilly workplace where gloves were forbidden because the companies thought they would slow the women down. we hear from Alma Falls on the workplace hazards they faced.
So was an apple in his hand and both hands on the belt.
That's the way it was.
So did a lot of women suffer from occupational diseases like that?
Oh, I hear, but you see, the neurologist had said to me, now did you ever report this in the packing house, And I said no. So at the time I had 5 big apple boxes of fruit dumped in the lower back of my back. That was, this fellow was fooling around, and he dumped all this in my back. But it wasn't that he hit me at the top here where I had the operation, you see. But the neurologist knew. He said, had you gone to the first aid and mentioned that, he said, you'd be drawn compensation for the rest of your life. But since I didn't get anything. I got 2 weeks compensation for this leg. I slipped on a rotten apple, and I was standing up about that high. I fell off, slipped from there, and I hit a piece of machinery, what would you call it? It's some kind of wheel, a gear. And I thought my elbow broke. This leg was so bad, and they give me 2 weeks compensation. And my leg is still bad to this day.
We hope you've enjoyed hearing from these strong women who helped shape the story of the famous apple box bells in the beautiful Okanagan Valley. We'll see you next time on The Line.
All right, before we wrap up, as usual, we want to highlight a few more standout episodes from across the Labor Radio Podcast Network.
Think of this as your weekly playlist starter, just a taste of the great Labour audio that's out there. You'll find links to everything at labourradionetwork.org.
All right, here are this week's shows you should know, and we're going to dedicate this to Harold, since he's the one who does all the heavy lifting on this segment. So we wish you were here, Harold. We'll see you next week. On Talk to Talk, Kirk sits down with Heavy Metal Summer Experience co-founder Angie Simon to talk about hands-on learning, shifting perceptions about skilled trades careers, and how confidence gets built one tool at a time. And on Apple Box Talks, boy, we got a lot of stuff about Apple Boxes this episode.
There's some inside filmmaking thing about what people do with Apple boxes. There's no apples in them.
It's just
as far as I know. Harold would be able to explain, but said, he's busy partying.
Partying and gambling. All right, CUPE-BC President Karen Ranaletta reflects on her long career in the BC labor movement and what it really means to show up for labor.
Over at the Labour Notes podcast, Diamante Brown, Jackson Potter, and Brandon Mancia tackle a big question. How can unions defend worker power in a Trump 2.0 era? And on Organising for a Change, No Sweat's Jay Kerr digs into the politics and practical realities of consumer boycotts and how international solidarity strengthens union organising at home.
On the Valley Labor Report, Jacob and Adam break down Alabama's political shakeup as Doug Jones enters the governor's race, and they share a story about building public sector worker power in Mississippi. And then on Union or Bust, another great podcast title, if I can say, Chris and Juan talk with 20-year Starbucks barista Sarah Backus about what workers at the coffee giant are striking for and why the fight isn't slowing down.
And that's a wrap for this week's Labour Radio Podcast Weekly, our hand-picked selection of what's new and noteworthy across the Labour Radio Podcast Network.
Harold would be so proud. You can find links to every show at labourradionetwork.org. Follow us, Labour Radio Pod, on Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, and the social network that shall remain nameless. And if you've got feedback, you can email us info@labourradionetwork.org. And yes, you can literally wear your network support on your sleeve. Get your union-made T-shirts at laborradionetwork.org. Patrick, for the record, you did not have that line this week, so I just want that noted.
You can get those T-shirts and wrap them up. Wrap them up for Christmas.
Oh, that's a good point. Yes, you can. They make great presents.
And people will say, what is this? And then you can explain on our behalf what the Labour Radio Podcast Network is.
This podcast recorded under a SAG-AFTRA collective bargaining agreement, although they're probably rethinking that at the moment. Edited this week by Patrick Dixon, produced by me, Chris Garlock. For the Labour Radio Podcast, I am Chris Garlock. Stay active.
Stay tuned to your local Labour Radio Podcast show.
We'll see you next week when Harold, hopefully, prayerfully, will be back. The Labour Radio Podcast Weekly is produced by the Labour Radio Podcast Network. Member podcasts are independently produced. Opinions expressed do not represent the network.